All right, today we're going to talk about building worlds. Well, not exactly building them, but more like checking the blueprints first. Running all the tests before you create a whole new digital world from scratch. We're diving into what's called the Digital Economy Sandbox.
Have you ever stopped to think about it? Who actually writes the rules for a new cryptocurrency? Or for the entire economy inside a huge online game?
And more importantly, how do they know those rules aren't going to lead to just immediate chaos, complete collapse? Because when the entire economy is just code, the stakes are incredibly high. One mistake, and poof, it's gone.
So how do you design these digital worlds without everything blowing up? Well, it turns out the creators aren't just winging it. They're not just guessing. They act like architects, carefully building and testing everything long before it ever goes live.
And it makes sense, right? Like any good architect, you wouldn't just start building a real skyscraper on day one. No way. You'd build a model first. And that's exactly what they do in the digital world. They build what they call a digital sandbox to play around with their ideas and test them out safely.
Okay, so what is this economic sandbox really? What's going on inside? Let's pop the hood and see how this thing actually works.
The core idea here is something called agent-based simulation. Now, the absolute best way to picture this is to think of a digital ant farm. Seriously, but for economics. You create this little virtual world, you fill it with what they call agents. These could be buyers, sellers, gamers, whatever. And you give each of them a few simple rules to follow. And then you just step back and watch. You see these incredibly complex economic patterns start to emerge, all from those simple individual choices. It's fascinating.
And the process for running one of these things is actually pretty straightforward. It's almost like a four-step recipe. First, you define the physics of your world. The rules like taxes, fees, stuff like that. Second, you create your cast of characters, your autonomous agents, the buyers, the sellers, even those holders who just want to hold on for dear life. Third, you just hit run and let them all interact over time. And then step 4, the moment of truth. You analyze the results. Did it work, or did it all just crash and burn?
So that brings up a good question. What kind of tools do these architects actually get to play with in their sandbox? What are the levers they can pull to change things? Let's take a look at a few really powerful examples, ones that are pulled directly from real-world simulation code.
Okay, first up, and probably the most fundamental tool in the box, is modeling price and hype. Think about it. How do you set a price for something that doesn't even exist yet? And how can you possibly predict how people are going to react to it? Well, one of the key mechanisms they use is something called a bonding curve. It's basically an automated pricing machine. It's a mathematical rule that says, hey, as more of this token gets bought up, which increases the supply out there, the price automatically goes up. It follows a set formula. It's kind of like a self-regulating market maker, all built into the code. And the cool thing is, the architects have all these choices. They aren't just stuck with one rule. They can program in a simple straight-line price increase, or they could go with something really aggressive, like an exponential curve, or even use more complex shapes, like a sigmoid curve, to carefully manage that growth. Each one of these formulas creates a totally different feel for the economy.
And we can even peek inside the minds of these digital agents. This little bit of code here from a real simulation shows a super simple rule. It basically says, if the price jumps up by a certain amount, then I'm going to buy. By programming them to be trend followers like this, the simulation starts to look a lot like the real world, with its own hype cycles and market momentum.
So you see, these aren't just abstract ideas. They are actual, concrete levers that the designers can pull and tune. They can tweak everything: the transaction fee, the burn rate, which is how many tokens get destroyed with each trade, even just the number of agents in the simulation. And what's wild is that each tiny little change can create these massive, massive ripple effects across the whole system.
But look, a healthy economy, it's about way more than just price, right? It's about how an entire society functions. And that's the next layer we're going to peel back. This is where these simulations start trying to model entire digital societies.
And to pull that off, the architects have to model, well, pretty much everything. They simulate resources, they introduce taxes to fund the whole system, they even have to plan for what happens when one of their little agents goes bankrupt.
This, for me, is where it gets really fascinating.
What this lets them do is test actual economic policy before it's real. They can ask questions like, okay, what's the perfect tax rate that will keep our economy stable without killing it? And in one experiment, the simulation spit out a super precise answer, 2.78%. That was the sweet spot for that particular model. I mean, think about that. That's an incredible level of precision.
But stability is only one piece of the puzzle. What about fairness? Is the economy fair? To measure something like that, economists use a simple scale that goes from 0 to 1.
And that scale is for what's called the Gini coefficient. It's just a score that measures wealth inequality. It's simple. A score of 0 means perfect equality. Everybody has the exact same amount of stuff. A score of 1, well, that's total inequality. One person has absolutely everything. So by keeping an eye on this number, the architects can see if their rules are accidentally creating, a digital oligarchy, or if they're actually building a thriving middle class.
Okay, let's look at one final and super critical moment for any new digital economy, the launch. Specifically, how do you give out the first batch of tokens? This is all about the strategy for that initial giveaway, a process that in the crypto world is famous or infamous, called an airdrop.
So, to run a realistic simulation of a launch, you have to model all the different kinds of people who are going to show up on day one. You've got your holders, the true believers who almost never sell. You've got your speculators who are trading in and out constantly. And of course, you've got the airdrop hunters, the folks who are pretty much guaranteed to sell their free tokens the second they get them. Simulating all these different personalities gives you a much clearer picture of what's actually going to happen on launch day.
And this is the payoff. This is the aha moment. After running maybe thousands of different combinations, the simulation can actually point to the top performing strategy. So in this case, the winner was a tiered distribution, giving out different amounts to different people combined with linear vesting, which is just a slow, steady release of the tokens over time. That combo led to the best result. This isn't just guesswork anymore, it's a completely data-driven strategy.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? What's the big takeaway here? What does it really mean to be one of these digital architects? Well, what this all really means is that economic rules are no longer just theories stuck in a textbook. They are literally lines of code that you can test over and over again. These sandboxes, they're like economic wind tunnels. They let designers find those catastrophic failures before a single real person is affected. And they prove that tiny changes to the rules, like a tax rate or a vesting period, can be the difference between success and total failure. Ultimately, what these tools do is give architects a real shot at designing digital economies that are more stable and maybe even more fair right from the very beginning. And that, of course, leads us to the final, really big question. As more and more of our lives, our money, our social interactions move into these worlds that are literally architected by someone, who should get to be the architect? Who gets to write the rules for us? It's something to think about.